The janitor solved the impossible equation. Then they found out who he really was. The lecture hall fell silent when Professor Williams wrote the equation on the board. This problem, he announced to his advanced mathematics class at Harvard, has stumped mathematicians for decades. If anyone can solve it, there's a $10,000 prize waiting. The students stared at the complex symbols, notebooks frozen in their hands. No one moved, no one dared. In the back corner near the door, a black janitor in his 50s pushed his cleaning cart slowly along the wall. His name was Marcus Cole. He wore faded blue coveralls and moved with the invisible ease of someone the world had trained itself not to see. As he emptied the trash bins, his eyes drifted to the board. He paused, just for a second. Hello friends, welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. Professor Williams noticed him standing there. Do you mind? He said sharply. We're in the middle of class. Marcus nodded silently and wheeled his cart toward the exit. But his eyes stayed on the equation. The symbols burned into his memory like a photograph. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. That night, Marcus sat alone in his small apartment in Roxbury. The walls were covered with books. Shelves sagged under the weight of used textbooks on quantum mechanics, topology, and theoretical physics. On his desk sat a notebook, worn and filled with equations written in careful handwriting. He opened it and began to write. His pen moved across the page with precision. Numbers flowed into symbols. Variables collapsed into solutions. Hours passed. The city outside his window grew quiet. By 3 a.m, Marcus leaned back in his chair and stared at what he'd written. The impossible equation. Solved. The next evening, Marcus returned to the lecture hall. The students had left. Professor Williams stood at his desk, packing papers into his briefcase. Marcus knocked softly on the doorframe. Williams looked up, annoyed. The trash has already been emptied, he said without looking at Marcus's face. I know, sir, Marcus replied quietly. I came to show you something. He stepped forward and placed his notebook on the desk. I solved your equation. Williams froze. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation. Excuse me? Marcus opened the notebook to the page. The problem you wrote on the board yesterday. I solved it. Williams glanced down at the notebook. His eyes scanned the first few lines. Then his face went pale. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a thud. This is impossible, Williams whispered. He pulled the notebook closer, his finger tracing each step of the solution. This is ... is perfect. He looked up at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. Who are you? Marcus hesitated. I'm the janitor. I clean this building 5 nights a week. Williams shook his head slowly. No. I mean, who are you, really? Marcus's jaw tightened. That's exactly who I am, sir. A janitor. Williams grabbed his phone and made a call. Dean Harrison? You need to come to Caldwell Hall immediately. Yes, now. I don't care if it's 8 at night. This can't wait. 20 minutes later, Dean Patricia Harrison arrived, irritation clear on her face. Williams showed her the notebook without a word. Her irritation dissolved into shock. Where did this come from? Williams pointed at Marcus, who stood quietly by the window. Him, the janitor solved it in 1 night. Dean Harrison stared at Marcus. Is this true? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. I saw the equation during my shift yesterday. It took me most of the night, but I worked it out. Harrison sat down heavily in a student's chair. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mathematicians have been working on this problem for 30 years. Marcus said nothing. Williams stepped closer. How is this possible? Where did you study? What's your background? Marcus looked at the floor. I didn't study anywhere, sir, not officially. I taught myself. The room went silent. Harrison and Williams exchanged glances. From books? Harrison asked carefully. Marcus nodded. Used books mostly. Library sales, thrift stores. Whatever I could afford. Williams ran his hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense. This level of mathematics requires years of formal training, advanced degrees, mentorship. Unless you have the gift, Harrison said quietly, still staring at Marcus. Raw genius doesn't care about credentials. She stood and approached Marcus. Tell me your story, all of it. How does a janitor become capable of this? Marcus took a deep breath. I grew up in South Boston. My mother cleaned houses. My father left when I was 6. I loved math from the time I was small. Won every school competition through 8th grade. He paused. Then my mother got sick. Cancer. I dropped out of high school to work. To help with bills. Williams's expression softened. You never went back to school? Marcus shook his head. Couldn't afford to. By the time my mother passed, I was 23 with no diploma and bills to pay. I took whatever work I could find. Ended up here 5 years ago. And you've been teaching yourself advanced mathematics this entire time? Harrison asked. Marcus nodded. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. Numbers don't lie. They don't judge. They just are. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. Harrison looked at Williams. We need to call an emergency board meeting. Williams nodded. We also need to verify this solution. I'll contact Dr. Chun at MIT and Dr. Rodriguez at Princeton. If they confirm what I think they will, this changes everything. Marcus stepped back. I should go. I have 4 more buildings to clean tonight. Harrison held up her hand. Wait, how much do we pay you? Marcus hesitated. $15 an hour, ma'am. 30 hours a week. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Williams closed his eyes. You solved a problem worth $10,000 while making $15 an hour to empty our trash. Marcus shrugged. It's honest work. That's not the point, Harrison said, her voice tight with emotion. You have a mind that belongs in a classroom, teaching, researching, contributing to human knowledge. Instead, you're invisible to everyone who walks these halls. She looked at Williams. Including us. Over the next 3 days, the mathematics community exploded. Dr. Chun confirmed the solution. Dr. Rodriguez called it elegant and revolutionary. Within a week, Marcus's proof was being discussed in journals and conferences around the world. But Marcus still showed up for his janitorial shifts. Professor Williams found him in the hallway outside the lecture hall. Marcus, you don't have to do this anymore. Marcus continued mopping. Do what, sir? Williams gestured at the mop, the cart, the bucket. This clean buildings. The board met yesterday. We want to offer you a full scholarship. Undergraduate degree, then graduate school if you want it. Full ride, room and board included. Marcus stopped mopping. I'm 52 years old, Professor. I'd be the oldest freshman at Harvard. Williams smiled. Actually, you'd be a graduate student. We're admitting you directly into the PhD program based on your demonstrated ability. You'll skip the bachelor's degree entirely. Marcus leaned on his mop. Why would you do that? Williams met his eyes. Because we were wrong. Because the system was wrong. You have a gift that could change the world, and we almost missed it because we only saw your uniform. Tears formed in Marcus's eyes. I don't know what to say. Williams handed him an envelope. Open it. Inside was a formal letter of admission to Harvard's mathematics doctoral program. Below it was a check for $10,000, the prize money for solving the equation. And below that was a contract offering Marcus a position as a research fellow with an annual salary of $90,000. This starts immediately, Williams explained. You'll work with me and the other faculty. You'll attend classes. You'll publish papers. And Marcus, you'll never push a cleaning cart in this building again. Marcus's hands shook as he held the papers. This is too much. It's not enough, Williams said firmly. You've spent 30 years invisible. Now it's time for the world to see you. That evening, Marcus walked into the lecture hall as a student for the first time. The same students who'd ignored him for 5 years now stared as he took a seat in the front row. Professor Williams introduced him formally. Class, this is Marcus Cole. He's joining us as a doctoral fellow. He's the one who solved the equation I put on the board last week. I expect you to treat him with the respect his mind deserves." The students burst into applause. Marcus felt his face grow warm. Over the following months, Marcus transformed. He thrived in seminars. He contributed to research papers. He began developing his own theories. But the biggest change came in how people saw him. Students who'd walked past him for years now stopped to ask questions. Faculty who'd never known his name now sought his insights. One afternoon, Marcus stood at the same blackboard where Professor Williams had written the impossible equation. Now, Marcus was teaching the class himself. His handwriting filled the board with proofs and theorems. The students watched him with rapt attention. Williams observed from the back of the room, a proud smile on his face. After class, a young black student approached Marcus nervously. "Professor Cole, can I ask you something?" Marcus nodded. "Of course." The student hesitated. "How did you keep going? All those years when no one saw what you could do. How did you not give up?" Marcus thought carefully. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because mathematics is truth, and truth doesn't need an audience to be real." He paused. "But I won't lie to you. Being seen, being valued, it matters more than I wanted to admit. Don't make my mistake. Don't hide your light because the world isn't ready to see it. Make the world ready." The student's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Professor." As the student left, Williams approached. "You're a natural teacher." Marcus smiled. "I've had a lot of practice explaining things to myself." A year later, Marcus published his first paper in a major journal. The abstract began with a line that would become famous. This proof was born in a janitor's closet, nurtured in stolen moments, and nearly died in obscurity. What follows is not just mathematics, but a reminder that genius exists in the most unexpected places. The paper won awards. Marcus was invited to speak at conferences. Universities competed to hire him, but Marcus stayed at Harvard. He created a scholarship fund for students who'd faced barriers to education. He mentored first-generation college students. He never forgot where he came from. On the 5-year anniversary of solving the equation, Harvard held a ceremony. They renamed the lecture hall where it all began. A plaque was installed outside, the Marcus Cole Hall of Mathematics, in honor of the janitor who reminded us that brilliance doesn't require permission, only opportunity. Marcus stood before the crowd at the ceremony. Dean Harrison handed him the microphone. He looked out at hundreds of faces, students and faculty, janitors and professors, all gathered to celebrate his journey. "I'm not special," Marcus began. "There are Marcus Coles cleaning buildings all over this country. Brilliant minds hidden behind uniforms and low wages. The only difference between me and them is that Professor Williams stopped to look at my work." He turned to Williams. "You could have dismissed me, thrown away my notebook, assumed I'd copied someone else's work. But you didn't. You saw me, and that changed everything." Williams stood and embraced Marcus. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Marcus continued, his voice steady but carrying the weight of every year he'd spent unseen. "The real equation I solved wasn't on that blackboard," he said. "It wasn't the one the newspapers printed or the one scholars spent months arguing about. It was simpler and harder. How do you prove your worth to a world that's already decided you have none?" He paused, letting the crowd absorb the question. "The truth is, you don't. You don't waste your life begging the world to see you. You prove it to yourself. You build your own proof, step by step, until one day you look in the mirror and finally recognize what you always were." And then he exhaled softly. "You hope that someone, just one person, will stop long enough to see the truth too." The audience sat in complete silence, some moved to tears, others staring at Marcus as if witnessing a revelation. Cameras flashed, but Marcus didn't care about the attention. He cared about the people in the back row, the ones who looked like they'd been told no too many times, the ones who needed this moment. After the ceremony, when the applause faded and the crowd dispersed, Marcus returned to his office, a space that still felt surreal to him. 10 years ago, he used to mop the hallway outside this very wing. Now his name was etched on the frosted glass door. Dr. Marcus Cole, Department of Mathematics. Inside, the first thing his eyes always landed on was the framed janitor's uniform hanging on the wall. It was pressed, preserved, and mounted like a relic. Below it, engraved on a brass plaque, was a quote he'd written the night he received his first teaching contract. "I was never just a janitor. I was always a mathematician. The only thing that changed was who was willing to see it." He didn't keep the uniform there to remember where he had been. He kept it there to remember all the people who were still there, stuck in places they didn't belong, trapped behind assumptions they didn't deserve. He knew the type well. Invisible talents, brilliant minds pushing mops, wiping tables, driving buses, working 2 jobs while solving equations in their heads. Individuals whose genius went unnoticed because the world tends to judge by uniforms, accents, paychecks, and titles. Not potential. Sometimes when he stayed late grading papers, Marcus found himself staring at the uniform and thinking of the night Professor Williams had stopped him in that hallway, the simple moment that changed everything. A question scribbled on a trash-stained notebook. A conversation he was almost too embarrassed to have. One moment of being seen. Marcus made it his life's mission to recreate that moment for others, to notice the unnoticed, to look past the surface and search for the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. So he started a mentorship program, then a foundation, then a scholarship fund dedicated to students who grew up like he did, overlooked, underestimated, and overworked. He visited community centers, shelters, and understaffed schools. He personally interviewed applicants, refusing to let test scores define someone's potential, because genius, he believed, should not require luck to be discovered. No one, Marcus often said, should spend decades invisible just because they wear the wrong clothes or the world mislabels them. 10 years after solving the impossible equation, Marcus Cole was one of the most respected mathematicians in the world. His groundbreaking proofs had reshaped how scientists approached quantum systems. His algorithms were used in major research labs. Experts flew across continents just to hear him speak. Yet despite all the awards, all the recognition, and all the prestige, Marcus never let himself forget what it felt like to be unseen. His students adored him not because of his genius, but because of his humanity. He listened. He believed in them before they believed in themselves. Under his guidance, several went on to win international awards, publish influential papers, and lead groundbreaking research teams. And every time one of them succeeded, Marcus felt that same quiet pride he had felt the day he first solved that impossible problem. But when people asked him about his greatest achievement, Marcus never mentioned the research that changed industries or the awards that filled his office shelves. He gave the same answer every single time. "My greatest achievement," he'd say softly, "was refusing to let the world's blindness define my worth. And my greatest hope is that someday no one will have to fight that hard just to be seen." To Marcus, numbers were never just symbols on a board. They were truth-tellers, indifferent to status or appearance. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't judge. They didn't care whether you wore a lab coat or a janitor's jumpsuit. They simply revealed truth. And Marcus Cole had proven the most important truth of all. Brilliance exists everywhere. In lecture halls and janitors' closets, in corner offices and bus stops, in mansions and housing projects, in people society praises and in people society ignores. The only question, Marcus often said, is whether we're willing to look closely enough to see it. Professor Williams learned that lesson. Harvard learned it. And now, because of Marcus, thousands of students across the world were learning it too. Because one night, a janitor saw an impossible equation and dared to solve it. And in doing so, he solved something far more important, the equation of human potential. The proof that genius doesn't need permission. It only needs a chance.